Welcome back to class time. It's now time for CSEC English Language. I'm your teacher, Vanessa Francis. Today we'll be continuing to look at the use of informative discourse, and we're focusing on statistical reports. So after today's lesson, you should be able to define key terms used in statistical report writing. Of course, you need to be able to describe the various features associated with statistical reports. And of course, the main thing, be able to describe trends in given data. So, first thing we need to understand, what exactly are statistics? So statistics are basically numerical facts or data. It's a group of numbers or figures that represent some aspect of our human interest. Now that we know what statistics are, now we can define statistical reports. And these basically present the statistical data after the analysis and interpretation of that data has been done. So of course, now we need to know our key terms. So one particular term we need to understand is trend. Now the trend, just as when you think of a trend in clothing, a trend in fashion, something that is occurring frequently, same idea plays out here. So a trend in statistics is a pattern or tendency in a set of data. Of course, you have different types of trends. The first type of trend is an increase. So when you have an increase, you basically have data that is going up. It is increasing as you go along. So you're analyzing a set of figures that are increasing. And these are the words you can use to describe those increases. So the increase can be steady. So it's almost predictable in a way. So it's going up surely. You have gradual, similar to steady, of course. You have significant. So you had a case where figure A was this, and then figure B was much higher. So you had a significant increase. It can also be a noticeable increase, or a sharp increase, or a dramatic increase. So if you look at this table, the figures in red are the ones that indicate increase. So you notice we started out with 12, then it moved up to 22, 31, 52, and then 63. So given those figures, how would you describe the rate of increase? Was it steady? Was it gradual? Was it sharp? Was there anything sudden about it? On the opposite end, we have decrease. So of course, when it is decreasing, you can use the same descriptors as well. So the decrease can also be steady, gradual, noticeable, sharp, dramatic, or significant. So we're back to the original table. And now we have a different set of figures in red. And these figures now are showing the decrease. Now notice we start at 65 in the first month. Then it goes down to 49, down to 27, down to 15, and then to 3. So how would you describe the rate of decrease? Is this gradual? Is this sharp? Is it dramatic? Look at the figures carefully and you can determine what term is the best one to use for that. Our next trend, consistency or stability. And in this case, you're looking at figures that they may change, but they're not really changing to an extent that requires you to say that they're increasing or decreasing. They're changing, but the change is not noticeable. So how you can describe something that is consistent, marginally increasing or marginally decreasing. So it just changes by like 1 or 2, maybe 5, nothing significant. So it can be minimal, it can be slight, or it can be relatively consistent or relatively constant. So the figures, they're like this with a little blip or a little dip, but nothing like this. It's not moving up and down. So it's hardly changing over time because in a real life situation, when you're collecting data, it's highly unlikely you're going to get the same figures every single time. So if you're, say, checking out sales and you go from Monday to Friday, the sales might vary a little, but you won't necessarily have the exact figure every single day. So you didn't sell 5 pens today, 5 pens tomorrow, 5 pens the next day, and so on and so forth. You might sell 4 today, 3 tomorrow, 5 on Saturday, and that sort of thing. So in that case, because the change is hardly noticeable, then you'd call it consistent. And here we have 2 sets of figures that show a level of consistency. So if you look at defective goods, you'll see what I was talking about a while ago. The change is there, you know. It is changing, but it is changing so slightly, so minimally, it's not worth calling an increase or a decrease. So it is fairly consistent. And if you look at the rude clerks, now, notice something? The first figure is 40. It drops down to 23. But thereafter, it remains in the low 20s. So we will talk about how you treat that further on in the lesson. But for now, you can say it was fairly consistent, except for that one drop in the beginning. Now, of course, you need to talk about fluctuation, because you will have fluctuation in your data. Now, how you can describe it depends on the rate of fluctuation. So was it dramatic, meaning you had a very high figure followed by a very low figure, or vice versa? Was it steady, meaning it kept going up or down, but it didn't go up or down in a very erratic way? So it went up or down, but in almost a predictable way, so to speak. Was there considerable fluctuation? Again, did you notice that it jumped from X to Y and back? And of course, you look at significant fluctuation as well. Same thing as considerable. And here's a table now showing 2 sets of figures that fluctuated. So if you look at the opening hours set of figures, you have it moving from 2 to 13 to 4 to 20 to 11. So it went up, then down, then up, then down, then up, then down. And then you look at the rate of change in that. So was it considerably fluctuating? Was it dramatically fluctuating? Or was it steadily fluctuating? Then you look at the second to last column now, no clerks assisting. And that also fluctuated. But look at the figures. You have 41 down to 22, up to 37, down to 12, up to 29. So the difference in figures is much greater right there. So you cannot use the same term to describe both rates of fluctuation, because on the opening hours, yes, there was fluctuation, but to a smaller or lesser level. Whereas on the no clerks assisted, the fluctuation was much wider, much more drastic. The next thing you also need to understand is the idea of significant figures. Now, when you get a set of data, there are certain figures that are likely to stand out for various reasons. So these are the pieces of data that are different from the overall trend. So you have the overall trend, but there might be that 1 or 2 figure in there that stands out. And it might stand out because it's much higher or much lower than the other figures. So let's have a look at the table now. So we've picked out some of the significant figures. So let's move across. So look at long wait hours. We have highlighted the April figure of 52. Why is that significant though? Look at the other figures in that line. You have 12, 22, 31, 52, then 63. Between 31 and 52, there was a very, very wide gap. And if you look at all the figures on the board, that would be where the greatest increase took place anywhere. Then you look at defective goods. We've highlighted April again, 0. That is the lowest figure on the entire board. So that one is significant for that reason. Then we look at the rude clerks. We started at 40. Remember we looked at this before? We said that outside of that one figure, everything else was relatively consistent. So we have to highlight that figure because it is the one that is the odd man out. Then we move to the last column. We have two figures highlighted. So in January, there were 65 complaints. And if you look on the board, that 65 is the highest number of complaints for the entire period. So that's what makes it significant. Then we look at March, where there were 27 complaints. Now, for that to be significant, we look at the month before, which was February, there were 49. So right between the 49 and the 27 for those 2 months is the biggest decrease on the board. So these figures are significant for various reasons. So now that we understand trends, we need to know the steps. What do you do when it's time to write your report? First step, naturally, you have to look at the figures in front of you. So you have to analyze the data, and in analyzing the data, do what we just looked at a while ago. Try to get the overall trend. See what is happening. Consistency, increase, decrease, fluctuation, which one? So look at these figures now. And these are the ones we'll be working with as we go through the steps. So we have 4 different car types and 4 different years. So we have the total for each car per year, as well as for each car over the period of time. So make sure you try and remember this. You'll see it from time to time though, so don't worry. All right. So first thing now, we're looking at the general pattern. So for the Ranger, we noticed that it increased at a steady rate. We also noticed it had the highest in total sales. And we should have noticed also that the Ranger sales were 4 times the sales of the Civic and twice the sales of the Intrepid. Now we turn to what was there for the Intrepid. Their sales were fairly steady, and overall it had the 3rd highest figure in sales. Move to the next car in the lineup, the Prelude, and it had an initial increase, and then after that it stabilized. So it was fairly consistent after that initial increase. Then it is also the 2nd highest overall. And the last car in the lineup, the Civic, was relatively consistent. However, unfortunately, it had the lowest overall sales amount. So the next step now, of course, make note of any data that is different. So remember those significant figures. So after you look at the general trend, see what is happening, going up, going down, changing, staying put, you need to look at the significant figures now. So here they are again. Look carefully, each column, each row. What do we see happening? You see anything sticking out? Anything exceptionally high? Anything exceptionally low? Any sudden change? All right, let's get into it. So, off-trend data. So this is outside of the trends we noticed. We noticed that the highest total car sales occurred in 2009. The next thing we noticed is that the Ranger had a significant increase in 2009, which perhaps contributed to the high car sales. We don't know yet. We also noticed that the Intrepid experienced a very sharp decrease in 2007. For the Prelude, nothing really happened. So the figures were fairly consistent for the Prelude. And for the Civic, there was a significant decrease in 2007. So our next step now, we have looked at the overall trends. We have picked out the numbers that stick out. So of course, you're going to check for the relevant data and make sure it is accurate. So you would have looked back on the table and matched up the figures you wrote down with the figures that are actually on the table. So here are some things you should have for the Ranger. Steady increase, highest total sales, 4 times that of the Civic, twice that of the Intrepid. What you should have for the Intrepid, fairly steady sales, 3rd highest in total sales. For the Prelude, initial decrease, and then it stabilized, 2nd highest in total. And then for the Civic, relatively consistent. You had a sharp increase in 2007, but lowest sales overall. So those are the data that would be needed in the report. So now, of course, you're going to think how to logically arrange the information. So far, what we were doing, we just looked at each row moving across, each column, moving across. But for the report, would that make sense to talk about the different vehicles in that order? You have to look at it. Does it make sense to move from this one to that one to that one as it was on the table? Or do you need to reorganize them? And you should be able to figure out how to reorganize them. So you need to decide on what order you're going to present the data in. And you need to determine how the data is going to be grouped. Now think about it. When we were looking at the data for each car, we said which one was the highest, then the second highest, then the third, then the fourth. So right there, that is a logical way to arrange it. Talk about the car that was highest first, and then the one after, and then the one after, and then the one after that. Not true. So after you've done all of that, you have written your first draft. Naturally, you need to read it over because you can't just say, oh, I'm so great, I can write it one time and hand it in, boom. No, baby, it does not work like that. You need to write it, yes, and then you need to make sure you check it, that you have no grammatical errors, because remember, you're being marked for grammatical errors. It is English, not math, English. Please don't take offense, math teachers. So you need to ensure that you check for grammatical errors because that is part of your grade. And you need to make sure that everything is organized properly. You have included all the details you should, and you have excluded the details you do not need. That is important. So there it is. Carefully reread it. Make your necessary corrections. And here we have a sample for you. Again, it is a sample. So it is just an idea of how you could have written it. You could have chosen to go a different way and it may work, but this is a way you could write it. So we can look at the fact that the Ranger had the highest overall sales among the four car types. And over the period, the Ranger sales increased steadily, as we noticed in the table, and it had the greatest rate of increase in 2009. Additionally, the Ranger sales were quadruple that of the Civic and twice that of the Intrepid. The Prelude sales were the second highest and remained relatively consistent over the last 3 years, following a significant decrease in 2007. Then now we're moving into the Intrepid now. The Intrepid sales were third and remained relatively consistent over the period. The Civic sales were the lowest over the period and were also relatively consistent, except for a sharp increase in 2007. So we have arranged the data according to numerical order. So we have ranked them from first to fourth, and we have spoken of them in that order, which is very logical. So now it's your turn to do a little work for yourself. So here is your cue. So you're going to look at the pie chart that comes up next. And this pie chart is based on national expenditure for a developing country. And the idea is that after you have done this, you're supposed to create a report on how the money was allocated among the various ministries. Keep in mind the total budget is 40 billion. So here is our pie chart. So look carefully at the pie chart. So we have it color-coded. So purple is education. And if you look on the chart, you'll see that it's 18%. So it got 18% of the 40 billion. Health is next in line. It got 20% of that 40 billion. National security got 16%. Public utilities, 12%. Agriculture, 10%. Social services, 11%. And works and transport got 13%. So, given these figures, what do you think you need to do in order to write this report? Do you have anything to compare over a period of time? Do you have anything that needs to be highlighted? Do you have any trend to note? This pie chart, slightly different from the tables we've been working with, because in this case, yes, you can compare, but you're not comparing one element over a period of time. You're comparing individual elements. So the first thing you should notice is this. There is no trend because you didn't look at education over a period of time. It was just that one-off. So this particular pie chart, not everyone, because there will be pie charts that can show you trends, but for this particular pie chart, there is no trend. So there's nothing to compare over a period of time. However, we did have some significant figures. So we know that the highest figure went to health at 20%, and the lowest figure went to agriculture at 10%. So since we have no trend, unfortunately, we have significant figures. What do we need to do then? So this report would need to focus on just showing the allocation of the funds. So you would just show how much each sector got. You can do a little rough calculation of that 40 billion. You're not necessarily required to, but it can improve the quality of the writing if you do that. So what you're really going to show is just outline what each sector got out of that big pie of $40 million. So you would only have to figure out, do you want to start at the top with the highest and work your way down to the lowest one? Or do you want to start at the bottom with the lowest one and work your way up to the highest one? So here's another one for you. The manager of Tasty Meals restaurant requested data on the sale of items in their standard daily menu. Now, the results of the survey are recorded on the table. Use this data to create a report for the manager. So the table you're about to see will show you menu items, daily menu items, standard. You're going to look at each menu item and look at each day. And the rationale is now, say you work for this company or you are contracted to work for them for this purpose, you're going to write a report to the manager. Perhaps he wants to know what's their best-selling item or their worst-selling item. We don't know yet. So here's our table. Now, for this, remember, you're looking at each item, how it performs over the week, but you're also looking at each day. So which days are the good days? Which days are the not so good days? So let's look at the table now. So we have fried chicken, baked chicken, curried chicken, and fish. So those are our 4 items. And then we're looking at it over a period of 6 days, from Monday to Saturday. So we have 2 sets of totals. We have the total for each item for the week, and we have the total for each day. So again, remember now, you're looking at the different trends. So look at the fried chicken trend. What's happening with it? Look at the one for the baked chicken. What's happening there? Look at the curried chicken. What's happening there? Look at the fish. Then look at the daily total. What is going on with the daily total? Which figures in the daily total stand out? Then we go to the total at the bottom for each item. Which items do you believe are performing well? Which item is in the lead? Which item is lagging behind? We have all that information. All right, let's go. So let's look at our trends. So overall, for the daily sales, so that was a column at the end, where we looked at the sales for the days, Monday to Saturday, notice it was fairly constant, except for a noticeable increase on Friday. So for all the other days, they were relatively close in numbers, but on Friday, there was a spike. Now, we have to look at each item's performance. So fried chicken, what happened there? Steadily increased. So from Monday to Saturday, the sales went up and went up at a fairly steady rate. For the baked chicken, what happened there? Unlike the fried chicken, it went down. But it didn't go down at a very drastic rate. It went down at a steady rate. So one was steadily climbing while the other one was steadily falling. The curry chicken now. The curry chicken did not just increase, it did not just decrease, it fluctuated. So the curry chicken it had days when the sales were high and the days when the sales were low. But the difference in these figures wasn't anything alarming per se. And for the fish, fairly constant. So probably it's the same people buy fish every day. We don't know. It's not our call to make. So there are the trends you need to pay attention to. Of course, again, we need to look at the significant figures as well. So let's look back at the table now. So some have been highlighted. So let's start from left to right. So fried chicken, we notice the total overall for the week, 1,517. And this is significant because it is the highest overall total of an item. Next column, we don't have any there. The curry chicken column, we have on Friday, 287 highlighted, and on Saturday, 227 highlighted. So you notice now there is a significant decrease between the figures on Friday and the figure on Saturday. Let's take a walk over to the fish. On Friday, we have 266. And if you notice, the other figures are in the 140s. So that is where the significant increase occurred. So we have to note it. And then we have the total highlighted as well because it is the lowest total of all the dishes offered. Now let's look at the last column. Monday is the lowest grossing day apparently. Maybe because people carry the Sunday Monday. I'm not sure. Not our call to make. You don't include that in the report. You were not asked. So all you can really say is that Monday had the lowest sales. And then when you look, you see that Friday has the highest sales overall. So what should your report focus on now? So of course, you're going to focus on what the total sales were for each day. You're going to focus on the total sales per item. You're going to look at the trends over the period per day. And you're going to look at the trends over the period per item. And of course, you're going to look at the anomalies in trend. What does all this mean? So, of course, total sales per day, you look at how much was sold each day. Total sales per item, how much was sold overall for each item. The trends per day, we looked at the figures from Monday to Saturday and we noticed what was going on. Were they going up? Were they going down? Were they fluctuating? You look at the trends over the period per item. So Monday to Saturday for chicken, well, there are 3 different types of chicken: fried chicken, curried chicken, and baked chicken. So you look at those trends. What was going on for each one? What was going on with the trend for the fish? And of course, you look at the anomalies in the trend. So you're going to highlight those significant figures. So remember, when you're doing your statistical reporting, you cannot just look at the figures and start working. You have to analyze the figures first. You need to look at your patterns. So find the patterns wherever they may be hiding. It may take a little while for you to see the pattern emerging, but use your pencil and you can circle a few things and you'll see a pattern emerging. You need to make sure you look at which figures stand out, which figures pop on the page. This one is very high. This one is very low. The difference between these two is wide. So you need to look at that sort of thing for your trends as well. Make sure when you're ready to write that you organize everything in a fashion that makes sense. Remember, you are being marked for not just the grammar, not just the information you present. You're being marked for how that information is presented. So it must make sense. Whoever reads your report should be able to follow it. It should have a natural flow. You shouldn't start with the highest and jump to the third one, then come back to the second one, and then go down to the last one. That doesn't really make much sense. When you're watching a race, they announce first place, second place, third place, and everybody after. They don't announce last place, and then who come fifth, and then who come fourth, and then who come sixth. We don't do it like that. So you need to make sure you have a natural progression in your report. You need to ensure that all the information that is necessary is there, and you need to make sure that you present it in such a manner that anybody who reads it can understand what you're talking about, can understand what you're trying to convey. Now, you heard me mention this a few times during the look at the various tables. You are not required to give your personal impression on anything. We looked at that when we started report writing in the beginning. Remember, you are doing factual writing, so you're only supposed to comment on what is in front of you. So do not say, well, chicken sales were up because people brought lunches the other days and they didn't bring lunch this day. No, you were not asked to do that. What you were asked to do is just report the figures that you found on the page. What you need to ensure you do is that you stick to the data you're given. So when you're reading through, make sure that you are checking back. You can check back as many times as you need to. It's better to check too many times than to take it for granted that, oh yeah, this did come first. And then unfortunately, what happened wasn't it. So you need to ensure that you always double check. So once you list out your facts, double check. Once you start writing, triple check. Once you finish writing, quadruple check. Check, check, and check some more. Who do I sound like? I don't remember which dancehall artist. I always say check, check, check. But that one, I like him. Yes. So make sure you are doing due diligence when writing your reports, all right? And ensure too, please, that you remember, do not fabricate any information. Do not put anything in the report that was not given to you. Do not write a report that is too wordy. This section, unfortunately, does not have a word limit for you to be guided by. However, it stands to reason. Remember the terms. Concise. Remember that word? We've been saying that word several times. Make it concise. So you're not going to go overboard with what you're explaining. You're going to stick to the points you need to make the points, move on, all right? Also ensure that when you're finished with the report, whatever format you were told to write it in, you have followed that. Sometimes you have to write a letter. Sometimes you just write a straightforward report. So make sure you also look at the question you're given and that you follow the information that is there.